So, Nick.
Steve.
That was amazing. Let's talk about something interesting now.
Yes.
Let's talk about...
Methylation.
What the hell's methylation? Oh, I wasn't prepared for that. And we're going to talk about methylation, which is all up my alley about chemistry, and it's about genes and about epigenetics and all this weird stuff and how it affects all diseases.
Yeah.
And it's incredible information.
It is. There's a lot in it. Really interesting. So, if you have any chronic conditions and things like that, we're going to go into all of the reasons that, you could have issues with methylation. So, yeah, should be a good one.
Let's do it.
Okay. Hey guys, welcome to the ATP Project. You're with your hosts Steve and Nick. Hey Steve.
Hey Nick, how are you?
I'm good. What's your leading going to be today? I'm waiting for.
Well, we're in my wheelhouse today because we're talking about methylation.
All about methylation.
It's chemistry.
It is. Yeah, it's all you, Steve.
Well, in 1990, when year was it? In the 80s. it's a long time ago now.
Yeah, it is a long time ago.
I worked as a chemist.
You did.
And so I know about chemistry.
Yeah.
And that was my first one. Look, it was detergent chemist, so I'm not going to pick up any chicks telling him about how I used to develop soaps and detergents.
Yeah.
But I worked for Customs Proprietary Limited and I worked as a chemist. And today this is very much a chemistry type podcast, but it relates to human health.
It does. It does. And methylation seems to be... Well, I guess people would probably more hear about, MTHFR, and that was the big thing in the 90s. I think everyone had MTHFR. It was something wrong.
Can we say the slang word to that? What people?
Maybe not.
No, we can't, can we? So I think we've been in trouble for calling it what we typically call it.
Used to call it. No, so that if people probably know it from that. But the methylation cycle is vitally important.
Yeah.
In the human body. So it does a lot of really important functions. So it's really important to have good, healthy methylation. So you don't want to be over-methylating, under-methylating. And it seems to be a fairly popular topic again at the moment. So
it is very popular. Now methylation is the addition or subtraction of a methyl group. So, sorry to get nerdy for those home, but a methyl group is a line coming out of it with a CH3. So the electron is the line and it binds to something to have an effect on your genes. We'll keep it really simple.
Yeah.
And the methylation cycle is an interesting one because, you can test for how well you're methylating by getting a blood test called homocysteine.
Yeah.
Now, homocysteine is a toxic amino acid build-up in your body, which can cause neurological damage and heart disease and a few other nasties. But if you methylate it with a methyl type of B12 called methylcobalamin, it can turn it back into methionine, which is a good amino acid that we all love. Yeah. And you get methylcobalamin from folic acid or folates, I should say, not folic acid. And so methyl groups get shuttled around the body. And so you can see that what we're getting at here is there's a lot of B vitamin involvement.
There is. Riboflavin
B2 is also involved.
Yep.
And B6 is involved because B6 detoxifies homocysteine down to cysteine. So the methyl cycle is a very interesting one. It has to be continually going or we get damage to our body. We get a build-up of the nasty... and you can get a blood test for homocysteine.
Oh, yeah, it's easily. I mean, I don't think it's covered by Medicare, but it's only about... Oh, God, you're going to test me now. I think it's about $30.
Yeah, cheap
it's
one.
It's not very expensive to get.
No. And the great thing about that is that means it's modifiable.
Yes.
And it is a risk factor for things like Alzheimer's disease. So if you're worried about getting Alzheimer's disease, which everyone should be, then you can get these tests and heart disease things, and you can check to see whether this risk factor is high. And if it's high, you can reduce it with activated B vitamins. So that's part of the methyl cycle and all that sort of stuff. But what we're talking about is methylation, and that can attach to genes. And we've come up with a term called epigenetics.
Yes.
Epigenetics. Do you want me to tell you where it came from, the history?
Yeah, tell me.
Can I take you back to 1942?
Please, that was the year before my dad was born.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I didn't know. I was going to say it was the height of World War II.
Oh, probably was. It was. Yeah, my dad was born year after.
And so we had a biologist called Waddington, and he termed the term epigenetics, which is a Greek word, which means above the genes. So it's like you can have your genes, and then they can be expressed in different ways. In the olden days, before that, we thought, oh, well, that's your genes, that's the disease you're going to get, that's all.
Can't change it.
Can't change it.
Nothing you can do about it.
Nothing you can do about your genes, can't change your genes. But we can activate or silence these genes, and that's called epigenetics. It sits above the genes.
Yeah.
And all that sort of stuff. So you can actually methylate these. So where do you want to take it from here? Do you want to talk about?
So I guess we'll talk about what what methylation, what sort of some of the things it does in the body, and then
Yes.
we'll go into the whole methylation cycle, and then
Sure.
we can talk about all the chemistry there.
Yeah, let's do it.
But yeah, so methylation. So why is it important in the body? So as you said, it helps with gene expression.
Yep.
So turning genes on and turning genes off, which is what we want. So genes will turn on and turn off.
Yeah.
So, if we're talking like, say, in the case of, say, cancers.
Yes.
So, we have oncogenes
Yep.
and we have tumour suppressive genes.
Yes.
So we kind of want to keep the oncogene gene suppressed.
Yes.
And the tumour suppressive gene turned on.
Yeah.
Activated. So it's really important, and sometimes we want to have a gene on, and sometimes we want to have it off.
Exactly.
So it helps to regulate that. So that's really important.
And that's a really important point, because if you are silencing your gene suppressor genes, that can lead to cancer.
Yeah.
And such genes are like P53 is the classic one.
Yeah.
And if you smoke, you will silence your P53, and that's an anti-cancer gene.
Yeah.
And what that does is takes the brakes off the cycling of your cell. In other words, it replicates very, very fast, makes mistakes, DNA mistakes, and you get cancer.
Yeah.
Put very simply. So you want these genes to be silenced. So sorry, go on.
No, so even things like women with the BRCA gene, breast
BRCA
cancers
gene.
and things like that, a lot of that can be methylation related. So,
Absolutely, it can.
So really interesting. DNA repair.
Yep.
So it helps protect it against mutations and things like that as well. Detoxification, really big
It's huge.
part of it. So it helps with, tagging toxins for elimination. It also helps to clear hormones such as estrogens, which is really important. And we can talk about people on plant-based diets that maybe aren't overly balanced, perhaps, that I see a lot of hormonal issues in women on plant-based diets, and a lot of it comes down to methylation. So if their methylation cycle is underfunctioning, or they're under-methylating, they're not able to metabolize and detoxify these estrogens. Therefore, they can have, imbalances develop and things like that. So really important for that. And also neurotransmitters. So it helps with the detoxification of neurotransmitters, so dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine. And if you have our COMT gene, so catechol-O-methyltransferase,
yep.
So if that one's not functioning very well, then you can't detoxify these neurotransmitters, and you can have things like anxiety, depressions, and things like that as well. So. And particularly phase 2 is where this detoxification with the methylation comes in. So,
caps the face in the liver.
Yeah.
Very interesting, because when we talk about estrogens, catechol-O-methyltransferase is the one that detoxifies estrogens.
Yeah.
So if you're a woman like you are, and you get a build-up of estrogen because you're not clearing it, you're going to be estrogen dominant.
That's right.
And everyone goes, oh, it's plastics, oh, it's this or it's that, but no one thinks this could be just methylation.
That's right.
And you mentioned vegetarian or vegan diets. I mentioned before cobalamin, cyanocobalamin, or methylcobalamin, that's B12.
Yep.
B12 is predominantly in animal foods.
That's right, yeah.
Unless you're supplementing it.
And that's the thing, particularly plant-based. If you're full plant-based, you do need to supplement B12.
Yeah.
Because, and as I said, I see a lot of people on plant-based diets that have methylation issues. They're not filling in the gaps with supplementation, or have their diet overly balanced. So even things like your methionine and things which are an amino acid in animal foods, obviously very important part of, gets converted to SAMe. So
it's S-adenosyl methionine for those people playing along at home.
yeah, so that's all really important as well. So if you're not getting your full amino acid profile, these essential amino acids, that can impact your methylation as well. So plant-based, people on plant-based diets really do need to be more aware of this.
Yes.
But even people who eat animal proteins, and we can talk about the reasons why they may not be methylating very well, but there's different reasons. So, detoxification, energy metabolism.
Yep.
That's another sort of thing that it's involved in with methylation. So it converts homocysteine back into methionine, as we said. So that helps to support energy production, helps with cardiovascular issues. So as you said, homocysteine can be connected to cardiovascular conditions. So we really want to make sure that doesn't get too high.
Right.
If you're not methylating well, that can shoot up. As you said, that can be a marker that we check to see whether you're methylating very well.
Yep.
Immune function. So it helps to control inflammation and immune responses.
Jeez.
So that's obviously really important when we're talking about immune.
So we're talking about detoxification, energy, immune. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. And then here's an interesting one. I don't work in the area of fertility only because it's a very
nightmare area.
It's a motive area, so I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But methylation can be a really strong factor, or poor methylation or under-methylating or even over-methylating in infertility.
Jeez.
So, if you are struggling with fertility, that might be something you need to be looking at, along with thyroid function as well. But that can be a big part of it for a lot of people as well. So it has a lot of really important functions in the body. So if we're not methylating well, then there can be a lot of issues involved in that.
It's quite remarkable. So those 7 key points about gene expression, DNA repair, detoxification, energy, immune, reducing histamine, and, of course, fat metabolism, that's incredible.
Yeah.
There's some huge papers on this. The one of the paper that I like reading, or liked reading, I enjoyed reading it, was one called, I'll title it, How Epigenetics Impacts on Human Diseases. Good title, isn't it?
Great title.
I loved it. I went, you beauty. And I got the full paper, 2023 paper. And it talks about, for example, a couple of diseases that are heavily associated that strengthens your point. You talk about detoxification of estrogen and you go, so what? Well, in estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, the poor methylation can lead to it, according to this paper.
Yeah.
And even, it goes one step further, brain cancers, like glioblastoma. Now, glioblastoma is the worst one.
Yeah.
It's fairly rare, but it's the worst one.
Yeah.
It's the one you pretty 90% die. And these are those two cancers are associated heavily with methylation.
Well, I'll give you an example.
Sure.
I've seen a client in the past, a couple of years ago now, that had breast cancer.
Yep.
And we checked the genetic factor. There was no BRCA,
no BRCA genes.
Nothing like that.
That BRCA stands for breast cancer, BRCA. So, and there's 1 and 2, but there's also ovarian cancer. But sorry, BRCA.
Exactly. Yeah. So they were plant-based, and we've talked about this in our podcast. I think it was our podcast on folates and folic acid. I can't remember what that was, but she was having a lot of nutritional yeast. A lot, which is full of folic acid.
Yes.
Right. So she actually shut off her methylation cycle.
Right. Yeah.
So impacted that with the folic acid, which is synthetic, and so she had polymorphism. I can't remember which one she had, but that made it
7 or
she had
1296.
She was unable to break down folic acid to get her folate, which then switched on her oncogenes, and she ended up with breast cancer. So that's sort of an example of how that can play, particularly with cancers and things like that.
And for those who are wondering, folic acid is, you might think, that's a B vitamin. I took it when I was pregnant or something. Yeah. That's a synthetic form of a B9, vitamin B9, which is really not found in nature very much and is hugely supplemented. There are supplements you can take 5 milligrams, not micrograms, and it should be in less than, it's way too high a dose.
Yeah.
And you can get it over the counter at a pharmacy. It's called Megafol.
Yeah. It's scary because there's regulations that mean that any prenatals or natal supplements have to have folic acid in them, because we've all heard about the neurotube defects.
Yep.
And that comes back to methylation, right? So that I will put the folic acid in there, but folic acid, synthetic, and if you have the mutations on the MTHFR gene, then you cannot, break it down, absorb it and utilise it.
Correct.
But the regulation is that it has to be in prenatal supplements. But there are some prenatal supplements out there now that don't have it. They have the folates, so they don't have it in it. So my tip is, if you are on a prenatal or looking to be, getting to get pregnant and going on a prenatal, look for one without folic acid in it, because the majority of them have it. And I won't say the name of the most popular one that all the doctors recommend. It starts with E.
Oh, I even know that one.
And don't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
No, that's scary. Synthetic City.
But it's horrible.
It's true.
Yeah, so look for one that doesn't have folic acid in it. If you're on a prenatal, change it to one that doesn't. There's some really good ones out there now that have all the really good active forms of your B12 and your folate.
Exactly.
So this is a tip.
And if you're wondering about which one's the best for you, go and see. And look, you're a naturopath. You're not in fertility, but certainly a naturopath. Nicole Brown Naturopathy, you can book in with her or anyone like her and say, what's a pre-vitamin? It's a good one. Yeah, it's devoid of these folic acids and magnesium oxides and all sorts of other weird stuff that's in there. There's some shockers, and and so you've got to be very careful of that, getting the right supplement.
Yeah.
There's so many different supplements out there, but you have access to practitioner products.
Yeah.
I think it's safe for me to say that we do not use folic acid in this company at all, ever.
No. do not.
So I'm not giving away any secrets here. You can look at our labels. We just simply don't use it because it's dangerous.
That's right.
Potentially very dangerous.
Potentially, if you have the MTHFR polymorphism, yes, can be very
and
dangerous.
MTHFR stands for methylene tetrahydrofolate, and that's the enzyme that activates folic acid. Now, about a third of Australians have a problem with it.
Yes, and I'm going to touch on that because, people say, well, I had my MTHFR checked and I have a polymorphism. Oh my God, what am I going to do? Just because you have that polymorphism does not mean you'll have a methylation issue. And as you said, 50% of the population at least have one.
Oh, okay,
SNP. And less, I think it's like 20% may have the two SNPs.
Two SNPs, yeah.
Which they may have a little bit more problems sometimes. But that, again, doesn't mean that you'll have an issue. And if you don't have the polymorphism on the MTHFR gene, doesn't mean you won't have methylation issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Just take the gene out of it. Just means that you may be more predisposed, and if you do have the SNPs, then you're somebody that has to have folates and methylcobalamin as far as your B12s, and you can't have the synthetic forms. But apart from that,
you should be fine.
It doesn't necessarily mean you'll have a problem.
Now, Nick, you've mentioned SNPs. Most people refer to SNPs as having a vasectomy.
Oh, yeah.
So we better explain the singular nucleotide peptide, which is a epigenetic thing.
Yes,
and a weird thing. It's nothing to do with testes.
Having a SNP, no.
No.
It's definitely
we
not.
just better clarify that because someone will complain.
That's right.
Why are you talking about testicles on your podcast?
Yeah, exactly.
So, no. All right. So if you have these, now we know what SNPs are. We can say.
Sorry, I should have explained it. It's called SNP. If you see it written, it's SNP.
And nerds like us just call it SNPs.
SNPs, yeah.
I know, it's funny. At conferences, I was at a methylation conference, what I do in Melbourne, and it was about 7 years ago. I was out near the airport. We had a big conference down there. And they were talking about SNPs. And I'm going, what the hell are they talking about? Because I used to teach, and you never say SNPs or mTOR or any of these. You say what you're talking about because you have to. And they were talking about SNPs. I'm going, is there something testicular I'm missing here? and then I figured it out eventually because it took me a while. But funny. So it
is.
Yeah, so all these, and B vitamins are heavily used, and also things like trimethylglycine and a few other things.
Yeah, so trimethylglycine, trimethylglycine. I drove a long time this morning. Oh, yes. So that's involved as well. So that's something else you can use to help improve your methylation. It's also called betaine, if people might know it as betaine as well. And that has a really, really important role in the methylation cycle. Mm-hmm. So that helps with the remethylation of homocysteine to methionine. But that's really largely expressed in the liver and the kidney cells only. Right. Whereas the 5-MTHF, which is another one that's used to
5-methylene tetrahydrofolate.
Yeah. That one is basically all throughout the body. So that's the one they focus on, basically more than TMG. But TMG can be helpful if you, for some reason, can't have B12s and folates. And some people can't. I'm really sensitive to B12, so I have to microdose B12.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, because I have, methylation,
You're
histamine. I'm weird. So you could use trimethylglycine, can be something you can use, but it's not going to be as effective as the 5-MTHF.
We used to use TMG for athletes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just as some sort of energy thing. It was, in the olden days. It's not used much anymore. I don't know why.
No, I mean, I use it sometimes in clinic for methylation issues if people can't have B12s and things like that. I use it myself sometimes because I find it better for me. But yeah, it's not as widely sort of used or talked about, but it's a very good product to use. And as you said, it's a really important role in the methylation cycle. So, to convert that homocysteine to methionine. So, so that's a really good one. But the MTHFR is kind of what we utilise more of for that folate cycle. So we look at that one. And then B12 is the other thing, obviously, that we hear about. So folate, B12 are kind of the ones that people know about when we're talking about methylation.
And you've got a favourite type of B12 because they're not all B12s are not created equally.
Yeah.
Like Martin Luther King.
So methylcobalamin is the one that I generally will use. There's one called cyanocobalamin, which is synthetic. Yep. I mean, look, I guess they're all synthetic, but the form is some are easier to assimilate. If you have the MTHFR SNP polymorphism,
Yep.
then cyanocobalamin may not be so good for you.
No,
A bit like
that's right.
folic acid, you won't be able to utilise it very well. So methylcobalamin is one that I use. There's also one called adenosylcobalamin.
Yeah, what do you think about that one?
Yeah, well, that one's really good for. So adenosylcobalamin is mainly found in the mitochondria.
So the energy-producing parts of the cells?
Yeah, energy-producing parts of the cell. Whereas the methylcobalamin is found sort of all throughout the serum. So that's usually the one that we utilise. Sometimes if somebody has problems absorbing B12, you can try the adenosylcobalamin.
Okay.
I've seen it work really well for some people, and other people it doesn't work at all when we're trying to get their B12 up. So
Wow.
it depends. But the methyl form is the one that I generally use mostly.
Because for B12 to be absorbed, you need intrinsic factor from the stomach. So people got stomach
Yes.
issues or achlorhydria, which is low stomach acid.
Yeah.
That can be problematic. What do you know much about hydroxycobalamin? Do you ever use that?
Oh,
one?
yes. Sorry, I do use hydroxycobalamin as well a lot of times. So I guess methylcobalamin for people more with methylation issues.
Yeah.
But hydroxy is fine. I mean, I would take hydroxy sometimes. It's in some things that we have as well.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Hydroxy is in some things out there, yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, moving on.
It's a good one.
Yeah, so that one, so either or. So if you have the polymorphism, you can still utilise hydroxy and methyl. So they're the two, and they're adenosine as well, but that's less sort of available, I suppose, for most people. But they're the two that are really beneficial to use, yeah.
So my mother is on a methyl donor at the moment. Her homocysteine level was close to 20. It's now under 10.
Wow.
So and that's to protect her brain
Yeah.
from and so I think it runs in the family.
Yeah.
My sister did have high, but she's on just good multivitamins now, and she's fine.
Yeah.
My grandmother had high homocysteine and died of Alzheimer's 15 odd years ago. So, my mum is still very cognizant these days, and she's 81. I spoke to her on the phone this morning coming up here.
Yeah.
So, so she's doing well and loves these things, and I keep them on her.
Yeah, and I'll say that I had my homocysteine done a year ago.
Oh, yeah.
It was 22.
Nick!
Well, and this is a good example because I was going through a lot of stress at the time.
Yeah.
I was working 12, 14-hour days. I had a lot going on. I had just a lot of stress. And so there's an example of what can actually cause methylation to go out of whack. And we're going to talk about what actually can disturb methylation.
Okay.
But, yeah, so that's why monitoring your homocysteine level is a good idea because it can indicate, okay, you're not methylating well, and we'll talk about over and under. But yeah, that was a perfect example. I was extremely stressed at the time.
It should be, if my memory serves, in below 6.
Yeah, a 7 to 10 ideally is where you really want to sit it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so 22 was very high.
For
I was shocked.
someone like you,
I've never had high homocysteine before. So it was just an example. I was doing a lot of work. I was doing work for different. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's an example of what can actually impact your methylation cycle and cause your homocysteine.
I am shocked. I didn't know they'd be that high.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen people where it's been 60 and 90.
Well, my grandmother was 60, but she had Alzheimer's at the time.
Yeah.
Because I started learning about this, years ago and got a test from the doctor and it was super high.
Yeah.
And it was too late then. She was gone. It's like that's what I hate about, not hate about medicine. That's being a bit, but this is a great way to test for homocysteine so you can protect against
That's right.
getting the downsides.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's so that's really interesting.
Wow.
So let's talk about what can disturb.
Well, what can
methylation.
disturb it?
As we said, you don't need to have the MTHFR polymorphism to have methylation issues, and if you have the SNP, doesn't necessarily mean you'll have issues.
Yep.
Because there's other things that can disrupt it.
Well, what can?
Diet is a big
Right.
one. So obviously a poor diet. So processed foods, sugars, a lot of our animal proteins now, unfortunately, are full of rubbish. So, meats have a lot of antibiotics. They have a lot of hormones. They have a lot of all sorts of stuff in them. Fish, farm fish particularly is really bad. Heavy metals and antibiotics and hormones and things like that. So they're quite bad. Sugars obviously is terrible. Alcohol, Steve, is actually really bad.
Why did you make my name there? I don't drink.
You don't drink.
I am a non-drinker. I'm the biggest boring.
I know.
farty.
I don't drink either. The reason I focus on that is because most people will drink a bit of alcohol, right? So, but it will shut down your methylation.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
So that one's a really interesting one. So, you know, someone might say, well, I have a really healthy diet. They might have poor methylation. But, you know, I drink a bit on the weekend because I have some wines and things because I need to wind down and relax.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if you're predisposed maybe even more so to methylation issues and you're having alcohol, it can really not be a good thing.
I always ask people why they're wound up, and I'd rather address that than, you know, taking drugs to wind down.
Well, I mean, it's only a short-term fix, isn't it?
Yeah,
really?
it is.
Using it for that reason.
I'm not an angel. You know, I was a muso many years ago, and we used to do a few drugs. Yeah, never got.
Explains a lot.
Yeah. Oh, geez, those days.
Anyway, alcohol, it's a big one.
Big one.
For impacting methylation.
All right, what else?
Vegan diets, as we said. If they're not done well and you're not supplementing and making sure your B12 levels are adequate, you know, and also your amino acid profile, so your methionines, you know, choline, all those sorts of things are really important for the cycle.
I'm going to misquote him, but there was quite a famous vegan advocate, and I think he said you even have to supplement with B12.
You do, yeah.
So this, I can't think of a way around it. But
no, I mean, there's a small amount of B12 in nori. A small amount.
Who the hell eats nori?
Oh, I do.
You do. You're a
chop it up and put it in salad.
naturopath
So
weirdo.
good. That's true. And the whole mushroom thing, you know, the B12 in mushrooms, that was they found out that it was actually in the soil on the mushroom.
Yeah.
So the mushroom itself doesn't have much B12. That whole meat for vegetarian thing, and that whole thing with the mushroom advertisements came out.
And they taste like fungus.
They do taste like fungus, yeah. So vegan diets, if they're not done, they're not balanced, they're not done well, that can be definitely be something that could cause issues. And then like if your nutrients, your cofactors for methylation, so outside of your B, so your zinc, magnesium, iron is another one.
Okay.
Copper. So it's not just folate and B12 and B6, as we talked about. There's other factors as well.
All right.
Medications.
Yep.
So things that can impact your absorption of things like B12. So antacids, PPIs.
Oh, God, we did a big podcast on PPIs, didn't we?
You did.
Very scary stuff, that.
Yeah.
Because you can get them over the counter.
I know. You can get 24-hour, I can't say the brand name.
No.
But 24-hour PPI now. So you just take one a day and you're continually shutting down your acid production.
It's like supposed to be in your stomach, but you shut it down.
So that's a big one. And here's a really big one which might
it?
shock people, the oral contraceptive pill. So this is really common for women who maybe are predisposed to methylation issues, that they have the SNPs, the polymorphisms.
Can I give you my take on the pill?
Go for it.
This is just
I don't know if we need the bleep.
You know how the pill depletes nutrients?
So it depletes folate.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just take folate for
and
example.
other nutrients.
But let's just take folate. You know, they give you 7 sugar pills a month, right?
Yes.
Why do they put folate in them so people are actually building back up their folate?
That's brilliant, Steve.
Have I just solved the whole problem?
Yeah, solved the whole problem. Look, you're in the wrong industry, Steve.
Yeah, but you know, it's like
Pharmaceutical industry.
You know, otherwise you just have lactose.
Yeah, that's right.
Why wouldn't they? Anyway.
Yeah. So it blocks the uptake of folate, which we know folate vitally important for methylation. So that's really common, and obviously can impact your zinc, magnesiums. That's why that sort of thing. It can increase copper, which is why a lot of women can get anxiety around the pill.
Yes, absolutely.
High copper. But yeah, really common. Obviously, a lot of women are on the pill, and a lot of women may be having methylation issues. Could that be a factor for some people?
Wow.
Diuretics, so other medications and things like that as well. Poor digestion, obviously, leaky gut. So anything that, one, you're not going to be able to absorb those nutrients, to inflammation that will create as well. Smoking.
Bad for you.
Depletes folate and SAMe. Chronic stress. In my case, that's what it was.
Pointing at Nick over there.
Yeah, I had
well,
chronic stress.
you know, that's almost everywhere.
Well, that is
again,
almost
too.
everybody, yeah.
You know, there are a lot of women sitting out there now who don't eat much meat, who are on maybe antacids for their stress, have poor digestion, maybe on the pill, maybe smoking. This is bad so far.
On the weekend
having wine,
Yeah, so the methylation.
Being stressed stress and drinking to me don't go hand in hand, but to the public they do.
Yeah.
So this is something to be considering because, all right, let's say you are drinking and let's say you are stressed.
Yeah.
At least get a homocysteine check.
Definitely, yeah. Get your B12 levels checked, get your folate levels checked. They're just standard tests, and then your homocysteine. Inflammation, obviously part of it as well. Environmental toxins, heavy metals, yeasts is a big one. There's also candidas and things like that. Mold, really common as well.
Mold, yeah.
So, yeah, all your environmental toxins, and then obviously, you know, your forever chemicals and all those toxic things, you know, you could go through all your kitchen stuff, your beauty products, the whole lot. They can all impact that. Well, obviously, folate, B12, depleting medications we talked about. So methotrexate's a big one. So you have to take folate if you're on methotrexate for autoimmune conditions.
Yeah.
If you have an autoimmune condition, it may be because your methylation was poor partly, and then you're putting on these medications that then block folate, so therefore you're making things worse.
Another one is sulfasalazine is another one that's very bad for your folate levels.
Yeah, that's right. Genetic mutations, so the MTHFR, as we said, CBS, COMT genes, they're some of the ones that can be a factor.
Wow.
And then high cysteine, high SAMe, and all that sort of things that as well. So the main things, you know, diet, toxins, medications, stress, you know, that they're the sort of, they can be the main things. Probably most people would have one of those in their lives, possibly. So.
Well, okay, so this can lead to numerous diseases. You want to run through a few, just in case?
Yeah, I won't go through all of them, but a lot of them. So
that's why I said a few. Our podcast times are limited.
It is, yeah. Autism, ADHD, MS, miscarriages, as we said, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, chronic fatigue, IBS, type 1 diabetes, Alzheimer's, heart disease, blood clots, heart murmurs, myocarditis, constipation, like lifelong constipation, asthma, osteoporosis, thyroid disease, bladder cancer, rectal cancer, gastric cancer, breast cancer, as we said, postmenopausal breast cancer particularly, which is interesting, migraines, gluten intolerance, deep vein thrombosis, anxiety, chemical sensitivities, Parkinson's, insomnia. There's a lot. So,
and of those 10 odd points you said before, a lot of people are having multiples of those points.
Yeah, 100%. So you know, a lot of these conditions, did they start off with a methylation, you know, imbalance due to any of those sort of situations that we talked about?
And you're right, they could also be consuming a folic acid fortified grain.
Yeah, they could be, exactly. Like go back and listen to our folic acid podcast. I can't remember what the name of it was. Particularly if you're vegan, if you're
having decades ago.
Yeah, if you're having a lot of the nutritional yeast, that's packed full of like folic acid and cyanocobalamin synthetic. So that, you know, when people say have your nutritional yeast because it's high in B vitamins, it is, but they're synthetic. They're added to it. It's not naturally.
No.
So that's a really big one. So and then, you know, your breads and all those things are fortified. Cereals are all fortified with folic acid. So as we explained in that podcast, you could be getting a lot of folic acid, which is going to mess up your methylation.
Oh, I mean, you could be on a multivitamin with folic acid in it. But you could also be having a cereal for breakfast, fortified, with bread for lunch, fortified, and pasta for dinner, fortified. I mean, it's scary stuff. All right, so if you're undermethylated, what sort of symptoms would you kind of look for?
So then we look at, are you overmethylating or undermethylating? And the way that we generally can tell is you get your homocysteine levels checked. So
of course,
obviously if it's above 10, and, you know, then you look like you're starting to undermethylate. The higher, obviously, the less methylation is happening. And then below 6, you're starting to look at, okay, you're probably overmethylating somewhat. So undermethylation, some of the symptoms could be fatigue, depression, brain fog, high homocysteine, so linked to heart disease, poor detoxification. So if you're having, you know, heavy metal issues or, you know, mold issues and things like that. So your blood, you can measure your histamine. So histamine in the blood, and if it's higher than 70, then that's can be an indication that you're undermethylating. IBS, headaches, migraines, bipolar, schizophrenia, poor memory, concentration, ADHD, foggy brain, allergies, insomnia. So any sort of that neurotransmitter issue as well. So, you know, you're reducing your serotonin, dopamine. There's anxiety or that sort of thing. So that can be a lot of the symptoms that you are actually undermethylating.
Sure.
And then if you're overmethylating, which I actually see quite a lot of in clinic.
Really? See, I wouldn't have thought that. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not an uncommon thing. You know, I might see homocysteines around 3 and 4. homocysteine between 3 and 4. So
wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
See, people think that's the enemy, and you got to get it low as possible. You don't want it too low.
This one you don't want it too low because what can happen if you have if you're over methylating?
Yeah.
Anxiety, irritability, so overstimulation from excess neurotransmitters and things like this. So panic, paranoia, self-mutilation, including tattoos and piercings. So there's a lot of the younger generation might be over methylating.
That's generation whatever they are, Z or.
I don't even know what we're up to now.
No, I'm not. I'm the X.
You're an X. I'm an X. I don't know how we're in the same. Like, you're so much older than me.
I am a few weeks ago. I turned bloody 56.
You did. You're old now.
Poor old bastard.
So sleep disorders, chemical sensitivities and food sensitivities, estrogen intolerance, rapid speech. I speak fast, but I'm not an overmethylator.
Yeah.
Low libido, headaches, migraines,
Yep.
rashes, like hive-like rashes and things like that. Joint and muscle pain, nausea, insomnia, like a real fidgety, can't sit still, adrenal fatigue. So interestingly, in clinical studies, about 45% of people diagnosed with schizophrenia were severely overmethylated.
Wow.
Yeah.
And schizophrenia is incredible. It usually happens to young women too.
Yes.
It's scary, and they treat that with all sorts of different drugs. But if you're overmethylated and you've got too low a homocysteine, wow.
And this is the problem, because you can actually push somebody, and this is where you've got to be careful with your methyl donors and things, or your nutrients. You can push someone from an undermethylator to an overmethylator relatively easily.
Yes.
So if somebody's on, B12s and folates and maybe TMG and a few other things, because you're undermethylating and you're taking them every single day and you feel good and then you start to feel terrible, well, then you may have pushed yourself into overmethylating. So there becomes a balance, and it's not just a matter of, you're undermethylating, just take the B12s and the folates and that's it. You need to take them for the rest of your life. It's not the case. You need to take them for a while and then you can take them out, see how you feel. You need to play around with it. You might need them a few times a week, but you don't want to push yourself into overmethylating, and I've seen that happen before.
Oh, yeah.
So you want to be really careful. It's not just as simple. And the premise with this whole thing is it's not just as simple as taking B12 and folate if you have a methylation issue. That's not that simple.
No,
There's so much more to it.
Yeah.
So if you're there's some of the symptoms of overmethylation and undermethylation.
Jeez.
And look at your homocysteine. I said anything above 10, you probably won't notice too much. But if you're getting up in the teens and then the 20s and the 30s
and the 22s.
And the 22s.
I'm still surprised about that.
I told you about that ages ago, Steve.
I'm old. I've got dementia.
I was shocked.
Got bloody Alzheimer's because of...
Yeah. And then anything below 6 and you can be starting to go a little bit too far the other way. So, so that's sort of the symptoms of under and over.
Wow.
So
it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've got this really cool table here, and a lot of the symptoms of undermethylating and overmethylating, and a lot of them are some of them are like personality type traits. So motivation. So if you're overmethylating, you can have low motivation, high motivation if you're undermethylating. Competitiveness, undermethylators, yes, very competitive. Yeah. Perfectionist, undermethylators are perfectionists.
Yeah.
Obsessive compulsive tendencies, yes. So this is kind of me. Perfectionist, OCD, competitive.
I've got there was one that stuck out here is ease in reaching orgasm.
Well, because that also is part of it.
Isn't that just being a man?
Yeah, well, no. But some people struggle with that area and some people don't.
Oh, okay.
So some people that can be a problem because it's too fast.
Right, yeah.
So it can be a problem. I guess it's not for guys.
Actually, you're right.
Guys. Yeah. There's a name for that for men, but we won't.
We're going to get in trouble for that.
Yeah, we'll move on.
But you also have a high libido as well. Okay, so if you've got a really high libido, then you reach orgasm easily, and
well, that's right.
Maybe too easily.
Yeah. So it's interesting sort of. Additional personality, psychiatric tendencies. So oppositional or defiant, socially isolated, anorexia or bulimia, shopping or gambling disorders, catatonic or delusional thinking is for undermethylators. And this is obviously isn't everyone that's undermethylated will not have all these, but this can happen in some. And then if you're over-methylating, possible that you may have grandiose personality, panic attacks, learning disabilities, very suspicious or paranoid, self-mutilating, as you said, and auditory hallucinations can in some people, happen with over-methylation. So
I'm trying to pick which one I am. I'm a bit of both.
Well, you might be sitting in the middle where pretty much you don't have either. You don't have too much of either, and you're just balanced.
Just pretty boring.
Pretty balanced. Well, you kind of want to be boring in this instance.
Yeah, it's funny. You even got if you're religious or not.
Yeah,
that can be for histopenia, which is low histamine.
Methylating. Yeah, it's really fascinating. As we said, that's not saying that everybody that's over or under will have these traits, but it's more inclined to these these ranges in some people. So. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think I'm in the middle of all this stuff.
Body hair even? So sparse body hair.
I'm sparse on the top of my head. It's very sparse there.
Yeah. No, you're not too bad, Sid, for your age.
For my age.
No, you're doing pretty
I've put some essential oils on there, as we talked about in my hair, and it's growing back a little bit.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. I have to go back and listen to the hair loss podcast to get this.
About a month ago, I had a haircut just recently. The month before that, the lady said, "Oh, your hair's looking good." And I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Oh, it's thicker on top." And I went,
it's working.
So I gave her a kiss.
Go back. Go back and listen to the hair loss podcast to get the secret recipe for that.
No, I didn't. I didn't kiss her. I didn't get reported. But it's like it's sort of like because that stuff does work.
Yeah.
It's like
can do
cheap, easy treatment.
Yeah. So, Steve,
all right.
How would we test to assess methylation?
Was my next question. How do you test for this?
So obviously homocysteine, as you said, is one way, really easy way. It's just a blood test. As I said, it might it's not covered by Medicare, so it's $30, something like that. It's relatively not covered by Medicare. In Australia, I think other countries is probably. I know New Zealand it's hard to get. Everything's hard to get in New Zealand. Yeah, I have New Zealand clients that I just can't get half the time.
Bunch of weirdos over there.
I don't know why they're very hard to get. Some.
My wife is half Kiwi, just for those. That's why. Made a joke about
that. Right. Yeah, she
is.
She is. All right. So homocysteine, as you said, B12 obviously and folate, but you want to check your active B12. So generally, doctors will just do total B12, but that doesn't mean that you're utilising all of that. So if you may have lowish looking B12. So anything below 500 for total B12 is low. Yeah. You want it over 500, but active B12 is really what you want to get. Yeah. So and I think the cutoff there is 35.
Oh, I can't remember the cutoff for
active.
Way smarter than me at that.
Something like that. So and then folate. Histamine, as we said, because then that will indicate, again, if you're over or under methylating. Uracil and thiamine. So these are both on an organic acid test, which is a really good way to look at methylation as well if you're going one step further and looking at organic acid testing. It's an amazing test. I don't have your brain when it comes to that, or Elisma, who used to be on the podcast. She's brilliant at that. It's like, holy crap, it's a really interesting test. Yeah. Whew. Yeah, if you want to hear more of Elisma.
Oh, look, Elisma's got some great stuff out there. You can.
Well, there's might be a podcast coming with Elisma Lambert and me.
She's do listen to that. I will.
Well, it's coming.
I know.
Anyway, so we'll be doing another one just to add on to what stuff. Methylmalonate, which is a B12, so that's again in the organic acid test. Yep. Amino acids, again, you can check all of these in an organic acid test, methionine and all of that sort of thing. MTHFR obviously testing as well to see if you have the SNP. Yep. And as I said, just because you have the SNP doesn't necessarily mean that you will have any issues. Most people, if they do, the more common one is the C677T. That's the one that up to 50% of the people will actually have that variant. Yep. And some people have the A1298C. Yep. A little bit less common. And some people have both, which they have more problems.
No, they're not screwed.
They're not screwed.
They have a bit more careful.
A lot less function in the detoxification capacity. So, and they're both a bit different. So the C677T, more of the sort of presentations will be cardiovascular effects, homocysteine, obviously, DNA regulation, glutathione production. Yep. And then there's heterozygous and homozygous. So heterozygous means you have one SNP and homozygous means you have two. So if you have one, you have 40% loss of function in this cycle. And if you have 2 SNPs, you have 70% loss of function.
Jeez.
So you have to be a little bit more careful.
Yeah.
And then the A1298C, you can have more inclined to have maybe neurological issues, neurotransmitter issues, maybe low nitric oxide issues. So, yeah, and again, 20% loss of function with a heterozygous and 40% with homozygous.
Jeez.
So, yeah, it's really interesting. So I've got this really cool little chart here.
Well,
so
yeah,
if you have the
it's a bit
mutation.
scary, this one, actually.
It is a bit scary. So how much mercury is detoxified versus stored depending on your SNP. So if you have one mutation in the C677T, 50% of it's detoxed. If you have no mutations, 100% detoxed for the mercury.
I think that's me, but I've never had it tested.
Yeah, okay, there you go. I reckon that would be you. Yeah.
I'm pretty boring and balanced. But my homocysteine's always been good.
Yeah, well, there you go. One mutation, you can have 50% inability. If you have 2 mutations, 90% of your mercury is stored.
Oh, crap.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then if the A1298C, 1 mutation will give you 70% detoxed. And then if you have 2 mutations, get this, it'll be 80% that you don't detox.
Yeah.
If you have 1 mutation of each, the C677T and the A1298C, 80% is stored, 80%. So a lot of heavy metal issues.
And you don't want mercury in your body. It's absolutely terrible.
You don't, no.
All right, geez.
Treatments, Steve.
Yeah, let's go to treatments because what do you do about this? Okay, so we've sort of talked about, let's just say eat well, a balanced, healthy diet.
Yeah.
Keep off the grains of folates and all that sort of stuff. Have some animal products in your product for B12.
Yeah.
What else do we do? What are some of the specific things?
So as we said, it's not just about a B12 and a folate supplement and you're good to go. It's not about that. You can actually improve your methylation through diet and lifestyle alone.
Yep.
There's a study, I won't mention it because it's another, I don't know if it's really come fully out yet, but they improve people's methylation just with diet and lifestyle. No supplements at all.
Yeah, of course.
So you can do it, but obviously a lot of people, that would be challenging because a lot of people don't want to change some things.
Sure.
But yes, diet definitely. So you want to get your leafy greens and things in, obviously, to get your natural folates.
Natural folates, yeah.
Eggs are really good because they've got folate, they've got choline. They're really, really good for methylation. And then there's things called methylation adaptogens.
Oh, my God.
Which basically are like an adaptogen. So they're an adaptogen. So just like our herbal adaptogens that help with, if something's high, it brings it down. If it's low, it brings it up. So it just modulates it. So these will actually help to modulate your methylation cycle if you're over or under or having issues. Things like curcumin is a really good one.
Good.
Rosemary or rosmaric acid, so in rosemary is another really good one. ECGC in green teas.
Epigenetics.
That's it, yeah. And then broccoli sprouts is another really good one. As I'm trying to, off the top of my head, think of them.
Yeah.
Quercetin, flavonoids, things like that. So they're really good to put in there to help modulate your methylation.
Good,
so add them in there. Obviously, avoid folic acid and cyanobacobalamin, as you've said. Avoid all your toxins, particularly if you do have the SNPs, if you have one or more. Avoid toxins because you're going to have a more difficult time detoxifying them.
Yeah, of course.
So, as we said, it will clean out your kitchen stuff, your pots and your pans, no plastics, or your beauty products and cleaning products and things like that. Gluten. So gluten, that can be a factor for some people.
Oh, it's bad for everybody.
Dairy can downregulate folate receptors.
Of course it can.
Dairy can. And then obviously processed foods and fortified foods. And then the lifestyle stuff, obviously. So manage your stress as best you can, really important. Case in point, when mine went crazy high when I was stressed. I was still eating well and exercising and whatever. Exercise daily, but over-exercise or overtraining can actually cause you to overmethylate.
Wow, okay.
So you want to have balance, like everything. You don't want to be going crazy with your exercise, doing too much of it. And if you are doing a lot of exercise, you need to make sure you're getting all these nutrients, methyl donors and things in there. So your folates and your B12s, make sure you die at some point.
Sure.
Obviously, a toxic-free environment. Saunas can be really good for detox as well.
Nice.
So anything that's going to help you detoxify.
Okay.
And then nutrients. So
what supplements would you recommend?
Yeah, so obviously you need to work with a practitioner on this. Don't just go out and buy whatever.
This is important, this one.
So your obviously folate or MTHF, depending on where you're at with
Yep.
your SNPs. B12, as we said. Vitamin E.
Yeah.
Vitamin D, vitamin C, B2 and B6, as we said, really good
Okay,
for helping to
good.
break down your histamines. Fish oil, really important as well.
Mm-hmm.
Really important for that. As we said, curcumin, silymarin or St Mary's thistle, really good because obviously that detoxification through the liver.
Yeah.
Withania and things for that stress response as well. Zinc, selenium, magnesium, vitamin K.
Yeah, good.
SAMe, but be careful. Again, work with a practitioner if you're going to be taking SAMe because you
Yeah.
can over-methylate yourself.
You can, yeah.
TMG, as you said, CoQ10, L-carnitine,
Yeah.
ALA, so alpha-lipoic acid. These are good for
Oh, that's a
mitochondrial
good
function.
one. Yeah, it's a good supplement.
Yeah, glutathione's really good as well, again,
Mm-hmm.
for that detoxification. Probiotics for the gut factor
Mm-hmm.
as well. And then, dietary stuff, as we said. So animal-based proteins primarily are the best.
Mm-hmm. Good old eggs,
But
yeah.
if you are plant-based, obviously it's not going to work for you.
No.
But animal-based have creatine, they have the choline, B12 and carnitine in it. And then the thionine, so your eggs. Soy protein, you want to be a bit careful with your soy proteins. Get really good quality, not concentrate and not make sure it's organic and whole soybean. B6, so like grains, if you are someone that's plant-based and need to have grains, have
Yep.
good quality grains. We just did a grains podcast that came out, so get the gluten-free grains if you can. Nuts and seeds, and then if you're vegan or vegetarian, you've got to be really careful, and particularly vegan, vegetarians can have eggs and things, but
Yeah.
vegan B12 definitely,
Yeah.
and, make sure your amino acid profile is really good. So yeah, there's a lot more to it than just B12 and folate if you for methylation. So hopefully that's helped simplified methylation a little bit and got people to understand a bit
It's
more what can
incredibly
impact
important.
it and
Yeah.
how to sort of manage it and keep it balanced as possible because it's super important because as
Super
we said, mental health issues, hormonal issues, cancers, inflammatory conditions, all that sort of thing can be
Jeez.
driven by poor methylation. So
Scary, eh? Well, Nick, that's about all we've got time for.
Yeah.
But such an important topic. I'm glad we did it.
yeah.
And we'll be back next week to talk about something in your bowels.
Yeah, we will be.
All right, well, I'll see you next week.
See you guys.
Bye.